Okay. I was born in 1924, and that was the beginning of the Depression in the United States. We had some rough years on the farm, and some things that clearly stood out as being important values. Well, I think first of all, family values. We had a very strong family I was a part of a very strong family. We relied on each other, we cared about each other, and we shared wisdom with grandparents and so forth. It was important that neighbors cooperate. We thrashed together, we baled hay together, we built fence together, we butchered together, and I learned the value of cooperation. I also, which was valuable later to me, I learned the value of ecumenism. We had neighbors that were Catholics and Baptists and Assembly of God and Presbyterian and United Methodists and a whole host of others. And we go thrash at their place, and their pie tasted just like my mom's pie. And so I grew up not feeling spiritually, religiously in a box. I felt that we were all one and one big family. You know, their hard work was so important. Dependability was important. If you were working with each other, you had to depend on each other. Honesty was important. Handshake was the deal. If you shook hands with somebody over a deal, that was it, and you kept that. So those were values of hard work and thrift, not throwing anything away that you could use, saving, caring about others, sharing with your neighbors. My dad and mother, we were a little better off than some of the neighbors, and they were very generous in sharing whatever we had. It was fruit from the orchard, or an orphan lamb, or a runt pig, or bales of hay or straw, or whatever we had. They gave me a strong example. Let me tell one story that meant so much to me. I was about 7, my brother was about 5. In the summertime, and we quit work early Saturday afternoon, put on our go-to-town clothes, but not our go-to-church clothes. And in the meantime, my dad had gone to town and gotten 50 pounds of ice. My mother had made a big freezer of homemade ice cream and an angel food cake. That evening, we got in the car and the Model A, took it to town, stopped there at the church. They were gathering there at the church for an ice cream social. The money would go to missions. Dad got out, the rest of us didn't. He took the cake over and set it down, got the ice cream over and set it down, visited just a moment, we went home. We did not have the money to buy the ice cream and cake that we took for the social, and it went for missions. Somehow that simple story has stayed with me as an example of values, that other people are more important and you need to sacrifice when you can. So, what are a lot of valuable things that go back to those early years. The longer I live, the more important I think the first few years of life are. That first 4 years is pretty well molded in so many ways.
Well, that goes into some of your personal philosophies. You just kind of illustrated a lot of them.
Yes,
there are a few more that you can...
I pretty much tried to live that as best I could, far from perfect. And then I've added, as I've read more and been around more and so forth, there have been other philosophies that have been important to me. I am United Methodist, and the founder of Methodism, John West, had some statements that stayed with me, and I have they've been very important to me. He said, number one, work as hard as you can, and as long as you don't hurt somebody by doing it, be honest, but work hard, make all you can. Number two, he said, live thriftily and save all you can. And he did that so beautifully, and we try to do that in many ways. And thirdly, he said, then give all you can generously to those that are less fortunate. And I think that's pretty much a value that leads to a happy, productive life. The other statement he had that we've tried to follow is, do all you can to help others with all you have, in every way you can, in every time you can, in every situation you can, as long as you ever can. In other words, it's a life of service that we're designed, we're built to serve each other as one family here on earth. I think that I'm a part of a family of about 7.3 billion men. And that's a big family. And the only way we can get along is to cooperate and share and love each other. One value above all maybe is that I think love always wins. It may take a long time, you may not live to see it yourself, but I think love ultimately wins over hate and bigotry and racism and whatever else. Love wins.
Can you talk a little bit about, you grew up in, a segregated America, really. You have a story about living at the sorority house, serving them lemonade. So cute. And you talked about some of the women you worked with at the sorority house. Explain who these women were and how they influenced,
Well, I was a green little country boy without a sister, and pretty poor. When I went to university, the first job I got was as a houseboy in a sorority house, a Friday sorority. I didn't know what a sorority was, but I got a job there as houseboy to serve meals, make salads, wash dishes, fire the furnace, take care of the yard, and I lived there in the basement, in the part of it. A really important thing that happened was I did not grow up in a racist family. I grew up in a racist neighborhood. Ku Klux Klan and all that was there, but my folks were not really. But we never talked about it much. We didn't see anybody that was black. So it was important for me, I realized later on, that the two black persons in the sorority house were the cook, Beulah Gray, and the maid, Hattie Miller. And I worked hand in glove with them and their family. And they were gracious, wonderful, loving, caring individuals. So after that, nobody could say bad things about black people to me because I knew two of them. And I've always appreciated that opportunity. Had I had the reverse kind of opportunity, it might not have been so good for me. So that was a learning process early in life.
And it seems that, you are very non-judgmental. You're very...
I try to be.
Yeah.
I try to be, yes.
And just your work around the world, which we'll get into in a minute, was so impressive. And it seems that anyone is your friend. You want to, you treat everybody the same.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an unusual trait. And so getting back a little bit to your philosophies and your philosophies on work and everything, I know you have some opinions about older people and how they can contribute, and kind of the context I'm thinking of this question is in some of these organizations that you're a part of, how older people can contribute and help. Just what are your opinions about this?
Retired people can change the world in ways that many of them never realize. My statement is, the day we retire, generally speaking, the day we retire, we are at the peak of our potential to be useful to the world. Because we have 40 years of learning by experience, of building relationships, of building a network, of learning skills, of learning how to deal with people. We have an accumulated amount of wealth that we have managed properly. Most of us do, not everybody, have an accumulated amount of wealth that we can use the way we want. We have trust and all that, of a network. And here we are. Think of the package that is when you stand there at the age of 65 or whatever, and with another 30 years ahead of you, or 25 or 20. Many of us have 15, 20 years of reasonably good health. We don't have a boss anymore. We can follow the Spirit within us to do what that Spirit says we can. And we can change the world. We can. And I have discovered that the United States is more or less a model to the world for voluntarism. There are reasons that in low-income countries people can't volunteer so much, so forth, but I think that's one of the things we're exporting a bit. We're great volunteers over here, and we need to be more so.
it's pretty easy to be a volunteer in America, you know, and people,
Yeah.
you just have to seek it out. It's not even hard to do, but people don't take the effort to do it. But anyway, you can go on about.
Well, an example of that is that we have the PET project, which is a hand
Let me take that.
crank,
Sorry.
which is a hand crank wheelchair for people in the third world who've lost their legs, use of their legs, or handicaps and so forth. And we're almost totally volunteer there. And we've sent 50,000 of those around the world and given them away. And we're just use volunteers almost exclusively. In the 15 years since we started, we have given away about 50,000 hand crank wheelchairs for people with leg handicaps in 101 countries. And that is one example of how volunteers can change the world so much.
Okay. So, you told us the other day a little bit about the 1,000-mile walk that you did. Can you talk a little bit about tell us a few stories about that experience and some of the challenges that you guys faced as a group from your perspective, and something that maybe wasn't in the news or whatever, some personal stories that you have from that experience?
Yeah, so that was a great challenge. I was ready for it. I was only 62, I think, and I had practiced, so I was ready physically. But the first day I almost caved in. I didn't drink enough water, and my kidneys shut down, and I almost didn't make it the first day. And then I learned from that and went on and be able to walk very easily physically. Well, it's 20 miles a day, 25 miles some days. It was difficult. The physical part was hot. We had people from 13 countries speaking 12 different languages, so it was a marvelous experience there. We walked at a time when there was some antagonism toward Habitat for Humanity. People saw us as communists. They saw us as people who should be home working instead of out there walking and didn't understand what it was all about. So we had a challenge of explaining to people and telling people why we were there. We stayed in school auditoriums, we stayed in campgrounds, we stayed in churches, and a tremendous experience. And going across the 1,000 miles, every inch of it, we walked, telling people. The motto we shouted was "No more shacks, no more shacks." One morning we were leaving, we got up early in the morning, there was about 150 of us walking, and we were leaving the town, the police car up front, the police car behind, and with their blinkers going, and a woman drove in from the side and leaned out their window and said, "What'd you all do?" Taking us all to jail. It is a great experience to tell that story, and be with Millard Fuller and 3 bishops from the middle of Africa, and all the people, one man that walked 1,000 miles, had no arms, he was born with no arms, and just rub elbows with people. My first entrance into overseas mission was to deliver 25 dairy heifers, pregnant dairy heifers, from the United States to Ciudad Quesada in Costa Rica. That was for heifer project. I had to raise the money to buy them or get them donated and get them on a plane in Miami, Florida, and fly down there with them. I got there with 26. One of them had a little calf on the way. So that was an exciting time for me. We loaded them on a truck and took them out to a Catholic school in the middle of Costa Rica, where they were going to be used to teach the children there in the high school how to take care of dairy animals. And then, following the tradition of heifer project, each child then that passed the course would get a dairy heifer to take home as their own. And that really plugged me into the excitement and the relevance. I could see it. I've always been a common sense person. One value I value is common sense, and it just made sense to me that this is a way to improve the world. And so that was one of the first. On a similar trip with the heifer project then in Guatemala, this illustrates how mission works sometimes at the best. He said, he pointed up in the high mountains and said, go home and get a flour mill and send over to Cesar Nace. He explained that Cesar Nace was a Catholic priest up in a high mountain village in the corner of Guatemala. and that they had to chop the ground, to sow the wheat, and cut it by hand and thresh it, and carry it 2 days on their backs across the mountains to get it ground into flour, and give half the grain to get it ground. So I came home and got the 28 stone burr mill, 15 horsepower brakes, diesel engine, and sent it over. And that was, I have to think 30 years ago, 25, 30 years ago. But out of that has come an amazing commercial trout developing enterprise on the top of that mountain. This creative missionary went back to Belgium, brought back trout eggs, hatched them out, got his people to build a pond and proved he could grow trout at that high altitude, and then convinced a company to come in there and hire local people to do the commercial trout. And so there's some very dedicated people out there on the front lines of Michigan, and it's been my privilege to. I never met Sasha Mays. We were brothers in spirit, but I never met him. He's dead now. That's simply one of the exciting stories. I've been with Habitat for Humanity in many instances of really creative work. And it does work.
Yes.
Well, let me tell one. I was in Republic of Georgia, and I was there. I was in Russia. I'll tell the story about the work camp in Russia. I took eight people from Alabama to Komi, Russia, for a work camp for a week. It's a small town, and there was a brick building there that had been abandoned. We were turning it into an orphanage and child care center. We worked with 8 local Russians, all women, hard-working women. Each night we went to the local pond, they call it, I call it the lake, to swim and clean up. There wasn't any shower. The last Friday afternoon, Friday evening, after that was over, they had a picnic for us in the Black Forest. We had an excellent interpreter, lady, and we had a great time singing and sharing about each other and so forth. When it was about over, Ivan, who was the husband of the woman that directed it, stood up and kind of pointed at me, not accusingly, but he said, "Why are you all here? You've been wondering all week long, what are these Yankees doing over here anyway?" And I said, "Ivan, for 40 years, I'm from Missouri. We have been building nuclear bombs, hiding in silos, pointing them at you because we were told you were the enemy. And for 40 years, you've been hiding them in caves and on trains over here, pointing them at us because you were told we were the enemy. And we're here in the name of the God that we both know and worship to say that we want to live in peace as brothers and sisters in a peaceful world with you." And that was translated, and I'll never forget, he very quietly said, "But we were never your enemy. Maybe our government was, but we weren't." And I found that to be so true around the world. You go into countries where the governments are crossways on something, and the people are just so wonderful and marvelous and delightful. That's one story.
And you see the need there, and someone like you does something about it, which makes you, awesome and, atypical of, when most people go be tourists.
One more story.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
One more story. And in Russia, I was there as a consultant for Derek and the church, and the last day I was through, and I went with the medical people to a big hospital, concrete, bleak. The doctors and nurses really cared. There were 1,200 children in it, and the doctors and nurses really cared. I want to emphasize that, but they were so poor. And these children, each one of them had a bed and not much hair. It was the children from the fallout of Chernobyl. They were dying with cancer, lupus, leukemia, and so forth. Marvelous, delightful children just like ours. But there was nothing to entertain them, no toys, no anything. So I came home and told my wife Barbara that. I said, we got to send something over there that they can hug at night, teddy bears, something. She said, "Well, how many do you think we can send?" I said, "Well, maybe you and I can do 500, and maybe we can get some help with I got it into the national news of our church, and we got it. Our house was literally filled, I mean literally filled with boxes of, we got 16,500. And my wife Barbara went through all of those and checked them for loose buttons and so forth. They were in the clear plastic with a bag with a note that people made to them, and they were sent over. We asked $2 per animal for freight. We didn't have to use it. We got free freight. So we equipped a daycare center over there that was needed badly. But the Russians love, those are the kind of things that build relationships between countries. And they'll never forget that, those people that were involved. And the people that send them will always have a little bit of a tie to those dear children in Russia with the teddy bears.
Wow, you dipped your thumb into so many areas of this. I mean, that's what's so great. Obviously, you're not one-dimensional, and I want to do this. You know, I mean, it's you see the need and you fill it.
Well, another one that we do is we gather used sewing machines. My wife and I began that 40 years ago. We gather used sewing machines. People donate them. If somebody dies, somebody gets a new machine, whatever, good sewing. And we ask for a used sewing machine for sewing notions, thread, needles, all that, and fabric. And we have sent about 2,000 of those around the world. Now each one is brought back just like new. They're reconditioned by professionals just like new. And with each one goes a new scissors and all that. And it has changed the lives of about 2,000, mostly women around the world.
How do you want to be remembered?
I want to be remembered by my family as a loving parent, grandparent, and my wife. I want to be remembered as somebody who cared and somebody who made a difference. Those two things. I cared and made a difference. That's all.
Well said, and you're pretty guaranteed of that, plus many other things.
Yeah. Had a good.
So, if you can talk about how you got involved in Rainbow Network.
Yeah. I was on the board, Habitat board with Keith Jaspers for 6 years, Springfield, Missouri, and we came off the board together. And Keith said, I think a Christian business person using real solid Christian business principles and Christian compassion, those two together, can do maybe a better job of doing missions than the church can. And I've come to agree with that. So he said, I want to start a Christian mission in a country that has great need, obvious need, where the people want to help themselves, where you can go in and out easily without a lot of paperwork, fairly accessible. And he went at that, and he picked Nicaragua very wisely. And he and I have been friends a long time, and I worked along with him when he asked or got on the board and began early on to be a part of Rainbow. I think Rainbow Network is without a doubt the best project that I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot of its nature. It is exceptionally well organized. It uses the local people exclusively in leadership. It creates great volunteers. It's making just a tremendous impact upon this geographic region it covers. And I can't brag enough on it. I can't over-brag on what Rainbow Network is doing with fairly limited resources. It fulfills all the kind of things that I've learned through the years that we ought to be doing. Education, housing, microloan, it just exemplifies so many of those things wrapped up in one package. I have great hope in the younger generation. I'm talking about the United States, that's the ones I know the best. Our generation, I think, did reasonably well in returning to the world the things that needed. We were fairly generous. We learned thrift and so forth. I'm not too embarrassed about our generation. Then there came a generation that many of them is what's in it for me. And not everybody, fortunately, but that led us downhill, almost caused an economic collapse. More cars, more houses, more this. I came at the university in Columbia and over Fulton, just a day course. And I find these young people asking different questions, many of them, than their parents did. I have great hope in that. I find that they are more in tune with President Kennedy, who said, ask what you can do to serve the world rather than the world serving you. So we're finding with Peace Corps and other groups that young people are beginning to catch on. I hope that they can begin to learn the pure joy of helping others, because once you get, you see, the goal is to, when we're born, the whole world focuses on us. We're it. And we get the feeling that we were made for the world. And maturity means just reversing that, so that we suddenly, eventually begin to realize that we were made to serve the world instead of the world serving us. I find that people that have real joy, that have real satisfaction of how their life is gone and is going, are ones that focus on service. I was with a young woman today who gave up an income considerably more than she's now making, but she's now focused so beautifully on serving other people, and she's one of the happiest people I know. And I've had great difficulty trying to help people understand there's more pure joy in buying a pair of shoes to send to the children of Nicaragua than in buying a new pair for yourself. This is a little bit of a crazy thing, but I have only 3 pairs of shoes, and I have no need for any more. This is the casual pair. I have a funeral pair, church and funeral pair, and I have one old beat up pair I wear out in the garden. And just finding the joy of service of others. And once people get into it and realize the importance of it and learn the skill, there's some skills in it. You have to know how to not make too many mistakes. We do a lot of having youth go on, affluent youth go on work camps to poverty areas. Now there's 2 kinds of kids that come home from that usually. There's one that comes home and says, boy, I'm glad I'm not like them. And they don't change their life very much. But then there's some that come back with a whole new understanding, and it begins a process in them understanding why people are poor and what can be done about it, and so forth. The problems of the world are many of them are fairly simple to solve if we have the will. More and more people are beginning to understand. 40 years ago, people say, well, I fight poverty, I work. And slowly they're beginning to realize that people who work hard are often very poor too. So it's an educational process, and I think with the technology we now have of learning about other people and getting information and the traveling that we're doing, people are slowly understanding that the majority of the poor people are poor for a good reason, for a reason, and that something can be done about it, and they can do something about it. And such a simple thing as with Rainbow Network, realizing that if you give $300 a year to send a child to high school for 3 years in a row, you've taken the child out of poverty, and send money down for medical care, and you save lives. But that takes a process, and it takes an organization, it takes the church sometimes it's educating us about others and building I am a Christian. I am a Jesus person. I think Jesus was the most God-conscious person ever lived. I do not desire or seek to argue with persons about some aspects, physical resurrection, virgin birth, heaven or hell, those kind of things. I don't worry about it. But I am solid in that I think if I were to be ruler of the world, I'd have two rules. One is the four-way test of the Rotary Club. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Is it beneficial to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and fellowship? That in all dealings and the Sermon on the Mount, those two things together. The cross to me is not something to wear around your neck to make an ornament. If you do, that's fine, doesn't mean much. I think Hitler had one on. It is not something to put on top of a church building, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. It's all right, it's a waste of money. What goes on in the lives of the people is more important than that. But the cross is a lifestyle. On the line of human need, any kind of need, any place, crosses the line of my ability to respond, then that becomes my cross for that moment or that life or whatever. And I have to choose. I use my resources, my time, my effort, and so forth to respond to that. And I have tried, my wife and I both together, to go through life seeking out human needs, observing them. My wife spent 13 hard years with the daycare center in a racially fairly integrated area, inner city, because she saw a need, we saw a need, and we put our lives into it. And I think that's what life's all about. When you see a need, simple or profound, that's what the cross is. I have 2 seminary degrees. I spend very little time reading the Bible. Now, that would be a shameful thing for someone to say it in my position. But I'm like the engineer who said, I don't get up every morning and recite the multiplication tables. I go out and build bridges. And I pretty well studied that book we call the Bible and know what direction it points us. The Old Testament points us toward justice and the New Testament toward love. And the cross exemplifies both of those. So it's a lifestyle. And not only each of the most important thing any parent or anyone can leave to their children is their values, not their values. And young people today are hungry for values. They're hungry for somebody to be a mentor to them. I am almost embarrassed at times with a number of people who come up and see me and say, Mel, you're one of my mentors. You're my mentor. That's a big responsibility. But that's what we're to be, the mentors to each other. And the values that my wife and I leave to our kids and grandkids are far more important than any monetary thing that we believe. I think that's with each other. I've had some marvelous mentors in my life. Jesus above all, Francis of Assisi, his love for animals, Martin Luther, he nailed the thesis on the door of the church and said the church is heading in the wrong direction. Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa. You can go on down the list, there's a lot of others. Bill Salo, who few of the world ever knew, was a druggist in my hometown. He never sold alcohol, never sold tobacco, never sold magazines, and he lost a lot of money because he wouldn't. But he said, I don't think those things are good for people. He meant the magazines that were off color. And that man went through his life suffering significant financial loss because he stood firm on what he believed. And that's the kind of mentors that we need.